Okay, again, I want to thank everybody for coming. I'm going to do a quick introduction here. I want to welcome Ms. Jordan Harmon, Cheyenne, Shy Morgan, and Kenzie Roberts. They're from Tulsa, Oklahoma, Eastern Oklahoma area, and they have been leading the way in the fight against hyperscale data centers. Jordan is Muskogee Creek as well as Mackenzie, and Shy is United Gadua Band from Oklahoma. But we're happy to have them here. This event is sponsored by the Indigenous Environmental Network, Eastern Cherokee Organization, and your food was provided by Big Witch Indian Wisdom Initiative and Tyson Sampson. So we want to thank them for helping us out with that. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Jordan.
Hello, thank you, Mary. Hashtag Jordan Tochunkaros, Indolviamalegidos, Tolsilegidos, Chiaha Amidolwados. Like Mary said, my name is Jordan. I'm Muskogee Creek from Tulsa, Oklahoma. I am from the Deer Clan, and I descend from Chiaha Tribal Town, which is down in Georgia. So we come from not too far away from here. And I'm joined here with my colleagues Shy and Kenzie, who've been helping with the data center fight all across Oklahoma, as well as with our national coalition, which is Stop Data Colonialism. It's on Instagram, you can look. And I also work with Mary at IEN. I work as a policy specialist there. I did go to law school. I do not practice law currently. I work in the policy and advocacy field. And so Mary just asked us to come talk to you all today about the data centers. There have been a couple that we've seen proposed for North Carolina. And then Mary shared with us the proposed resolution for EBCI, which is a ban or a moratorium on data centers. So first we're going to start with some information, and then we're going to go into community strategies on data center fights, and then we're going to open it to a discussion. So first, this is the resolution as it's currently written, proposed by the Tribal Council. It basically acknowledges the environmental impacts of the data center and then provides a total ban on hyperscale data centers. And then it defines the data center as a large-scale facility, campus of the facility, or array of interconnected facilities. Because sometimes they will build smaller buildings, but all clumped together on the same land to avoid zoning laws, but it actually is still a large facility. And this was tabled, and they will be hearing it again, and the sponsors of this resolution really want the citizens to come to the council meeting on May 7th, voice your support for the data center ban, and call them, contact your council reps, put a lot of pressure on them, on all of them, to pass this moratorium. So the first thing people ask is, what is a data center? Because it's kind of new to a lot of people, even though they've been around for a while. We haven't seen this type of development before. Oh, yeah, I was Okay. So a data center has been around since the 1940s. It's essentially a temperature-controlled building with servers and computer chips that house the data and the digital infrastructure that's involved in computing. And they can come from as small as like one server rack to as large as a couple thousand-acre campus. Hyperscale, that's where we get to the hyperscale data center. So we focus our advocacy on the hyperscale because the impact is so big and it's so new. We really didn't see hyperscale data centers till around the 2000s, and a lot of them started being built as crypto mines. Now they're being built as AI data centers, mostly. The top 5 hyperscalers in the world are Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Meta, and Apple, and these are all billionaire companies. They're pushing into becoming the first trillionaires in the world. These are not people that need your money. So this is examples of 2 different sizes of data centers. This one is Tulsa Connect. It's a data center in Tulsa that's been around since 1996. It actually has 3 locations, and it's about the size of this building in downtown. It's still relatively large. However, this would be considered a hyperscale data center. This is Amazon's Project Pioneer in Indiana. It's Amazon's largest data center, and it's about 1,200 acres. It's a big difference. This is Amazon's Project Rainier at night, so you can just see how bright it is. It's like as bright as an airport, and it's lit up 24/7. It never goes dark. This is Core Scientific Marble 1. This is actually currently the largest data center in North Carolina currently in operation, and it's about 70 acres. It's still very large, but as you can see, it's quite a bit smaller than the 1,200 acre Amazon one. They're now talking about converting this from a crypto mining facility into an AI data center. Look out for rezoning applications or land purchases because they'll probably be wanting to expand this. There's a larger data center currently being proposed in Charlotte that would be 136 acres. So these are some of the quick facts on the impacts of hyperscale data centers. One of the first things you'll notice is the sound pollution. They are very loud. That is mostly due to 1, any kind of power generation that exists on site, and 2, any kind of HVAC cooling systems, because it requires some really intense industrialized cooling for the facilities. They're also starting to use LRAD, which if you don't know what that is, it's like long range acoustic decibels, I think is what it stands for, but it's used as a security method, and it causes harm to your brain and like your heart, and it's a certain level of decibels as security. You saw the example of the light pollution. That can impact migrating bugs and birds. It can impact the land around you, and it can just be a nuisance if it's next door to you. Air pollution, that mostly comes from the generators. A lot of them are powered through natural gas. They also have backup diesel generators. They do tend to test those regularly, and we're talking about huge, like imagine the size of generators you would need to power that Amazon facility. That's the type of generator we're talking here. The water contamination. So you'll hear a lot about water conservation and closed loop systems and water positive data centers. That's all just language they're using to manipulate how you view the data center. Even with systems that like so-called conserve water, they have to add chemicals for the cooling agent. And some of those chemicals are PFAS, which is the forever chemicals. That's like fluorocarbons. They also use other polluting chemicals like glycol, and that all is needed to cool the data center. And once that goes in your creek, it's there forever. They can use up to 10 million gallons per day for a 250 acre facility. Sometimes they can use even more than that. One of our hyperscale data centers they're building in Tulsa is Project Anthem. It is a meta data center, and it's projected to use up to 1 billion gallons of water per day that they're taking from the city's water. Increased electricity bills. The reports are showing that people who live close to data centers pay more in electricity, sometimes hundreds of times more. That's true in Virginia, where they have the data center hub of the world is located in Virginia, and they're paying like astronomical energy prices. There was a story that came out in Texas. There's a residential community that lives near a data center there, and the data center is using millions of gallons of water per day during the drought. The residents of the town are being asked to conserve water and to take shorter showers and things like that. Power outages, stress on the grids, especially in rural areas. The grids can't handle that amount of energy. And then there's really not that much benefit. Little to no jobs are actually created. They'll try to say, oh, we're gonna provide, so many jobs, we're gonna train your kids in tech. But in reality, it's a boom and bust industry. Maybe there's 1,500 jobs for construction. Not all of those are guaranteed to be local. A lot of them are brought in. They have specialized skills that they need to build them. And then afterwards, you'll be lucky to have 100 full-time jobs. Lucky to have that many jobs. and they're not always high-paying tech jobs. A lot of it is security. The economic benefit is limited in short term. The AI companies are actually not doing financially well. They are not making returns on their investments. They are desperate to build and build and build because their shareholders are like engaging in derivative lawsuits because they're in financial trouble. And then the tax abatements. Most counties and cities are providing tax incentives for the data centers to build, and they're losing out on billions in revenue because of that. And then, of course, the forms of cancers. There's more studies on the impact of living near the facilities. And then the NDAs. When a data center developer rolls into your town, the first thing they do is they go to the city manager, or they go to the city council, or they go to the city attorney, or even your tribal councils and your tribal attorneys, and they sign a non-disclosure agreement. Now, they're not allowed to tell you who the company is. They're not allowed to tell you how big it's going to be. They're not allowed to tell you how much water they're going to use. They hide all this stuff behind the NDAs. You may not even know it exists. We didn't know about Project Anthem until like a year after they already started planning it because of the NDAs. So why are the data centers coming to North Carolina? A lot of similar reasons. Actually, this slide originally said, why are data centers targeting Oklahoma? And I was reading this, it was like pretty much the same thing they're doing across the country. Number one, the availability of power through coal, gas plants, or what they're calling renewable energy like nuclear, which is really not. In North Carolina, the number one power source is natural gas, coal, and nuclear. Those are three of the top ways that data centers are being powered. They think that in rural areas, polluting impacts will be noticed less, or they just don't care. They'll make a sacrifice zone. They need a lot of land. They need a lot of space to build these huge campuses, and they need access to water. We're talking obscene amounts of water. So when a developer comes to a place like this and they see all this water, the first thing they think is, dang, we could be pumping that shit into our facilities and making a buck off it and then pumping it right back in the river, and none of these hicks are going to even notice that it's polluted now. And that's really what they think of rural people, that they can just take advantage of you. But it's not true. And then community stakeholder and support. So they come with a lot of promises. They come to rural communities that need the money and they need jobs, and their representatives know that. So they say, you're going to get, $20 million a year in tax money if you build this in your county. And we're going to donate $2 million a year to your school district if you let us build this in your county. And we're going to give scholarships and internships to your students if you give us all your water and let us build in your county. So that's how they're getting these councils, that's how they're getting these leaders to sign on to this, is they're making all these big promises. And what we're hoping to inform people of is that, one, they rarely deliver on what they're promising, and two, even if they did, the trade-off is not worth it. This is just an example of the various types of data centers and how they can range in size from something that's small and scalable all the way up to a hyperscale. So what powers data centers? These things run on vast amounts of energy 24/7. Our public service company in Oklahoma has said that they're having historic applications. So the customers of the data center, that are the data center developers applying for energy distribution from our public service company, they're asking for more energy than anybody ever has in the history of our state. So coal and fracked gas is the main way. Natural gas is the largest source, over 40%, is responsible for powering data centers. They're really trying to push the nuclear energy. They want this to be like the solution to the data center energy problem, and they want people to feel like nuclear energy is very safe, renewable, and sustainable, but it's actually none of those things. There's all these executive orders around American energy. These came out shortly before the American Dominance in Artificial Intelligence executive order came out, because that's what it's for. They're trying to support this industry. Okay. So this, Okay, so the video that we're gonna watch is actually on our way up here. We stopped in Memphis at the XAI data center, which is Elon Musk's data center. He wants to build the largest one in the world. This is Colossus One, and this is now the #1 polluter in the city of Memphis. So first of all, you can hear it. These are the gas generators used to power it. He actually had to remove about half of those because he was in violation of the Clean Air Act. And let's see if I can get it to light in. And I don't know if you can see it on here, but if you can see that like haziness, that's the gas. They're just pumping those emissions right into the air. And you can't really see because of the clouds, but this entire airspace is completely hazy from the emissions. And we could smell it from about 2 miles away. And then as soon as we got there, in about 5 minutes of being there, we had a headache and we felt nauseous. And we felt very sick, like almost immediately from being close to that data center. Like we had to get out of there because we felt bad. And there's neighborhoods there, like it's a community. So yeah, the nuclear energy. So if you've never heard of greenwashing, this is big in the sustainable energy industry. It's where they come up with a technology and they will tell you that it's environmentally friendly, or they will tell you that it reduces emissions, but in reality, it doesn't do everything they say. It's actually not that environmentally friendly. It often still relies on things like fossil fuels. Nuclear energy is a good example because to get the nuclear energy, they have to mine. They have to mine Navajo Nation lands. They have to mine indigenous lands. They have to refine it. They have to process it. If you don't know, there's only one uranium processing facility in the country. It's a White Mesa Mill. It's a small native community in Utah. Their entire community is poisoned because of this. And we will get to questions at the very end just so we don't take a lot of time. So yeah, hold on to that thought. Then there's the storage and waste. There's actually not a way to permanently store nuclear waste without it leaking and seeping into the ground. We have radioactive soil in Oklahoma. Cherokee Nation had to spend decades cleaning it up. And then solar, like you'll see in Georgia, they've mowed down 800 acres of bear conservation habitat to put a solar farm to fuel a data center. And then there's the water. People are very concerned about the water, as they should be. So according to the Environmental and Energy Study Institute, a medium-sized data center can consume up to 110 million gallons of water per year, which is the equivalent of approximately 1,000 households. Large data centers can use up to 5 million gallons per day, or 1.8 billion annually. It's estimated that US data centers consume 449 million gallons of water per day and 163.7 billion gallons annually. And the United States actually has the most data centers in the world. So they're trying to convince the public that we need to build this for national security. We need to build this because China's building data centers too, and we have to beat China. Like, there's already thousands of data centers here, and all of that is just kind of BS, to be honest. The strain on the grid and driving up power bills. So the hyperscale data centers and not regular people are behind the rising energy demand. We actually don't need to build a crap ton more power plants. They just want you to believe that so they can build the data center. So data centers can consume 10 to 50 times more energy per square foot than conventional commercial buildings. They also supply much less jobs per square foot than other types of commercial buildings. So yeah, you can read all that. Now this is a graph that I really like to show ever since I saw it. This comes from UC Santa Barbara, because something you'll hear from tech bros and people invested in the industry will say, you always use data centers. All y'all have your phones out right now. You're using a data center. If you're on Facebook, you're using a data center. And this is what I have to show them, because this shows the implications of the AI boom. The graph shows the number of data centers. The dark gray is those already built. The medium gray is the ones currently being built. The light gray is planned, and the black is stalled or canceled. This is from 2010 right here. This is the amount of data centers. I don't know if you remember when Facebook came out, but it was like around 2009 or something like that. This from 2010 to 2020 is right here. This is the social media boom right there. This is the amount of data centers needed for that. Then around 23, you have the AI boom. And look how much it exploded from 22. Now look at 2024. Now look at 2025, way the hell up here. Well, what's going on in 2025? ChatGPT, OpenAI, all these freaking AI programs. They're using it in the military. The flock cameras are coming out. This is many, many times more data centers than what we had from 2010 to 2020. And yet, allegedly, Facebook is causing the increase in demand. So I just like to show that to people who think that.
Is that in our presentation packet?
No, but we have it available.
Yeah, we can share the slides too afterward. And actually, that concludes my part of the presentation. So now Shai's going to talk more about AI, why you shouldn't use it, and why is that.
Can we ask questions before she starts her section?
I think we should wait because we might run out of time if we do that. Just hold on.
We'll try to go really fast, but not too fast. So there are different models of AI, and what we're seeing a push for right now is generative AI. There's an assumption that generative AI is fully intelligent and fully autonomous. However, it is not. I would liken generative AI to a really, really high-powered predictive text like you see in your phone. Here you see the different models of AI. There's artificial narrow intelligence, and those are weak AI systems that would be like your predictive text. And then there's AGI, artificial general intelligence, and those are strong AI machines to perform human tasks, thinking, learning, and applying knowledge. And then artificial superintelligence. Those are theoretical. These systems do not exist yet. The reason for these mass build-outs of hyperscale data centers is to achieve artificial superintelligence, which isn't even in existence yet. AGI is built off of the code that we put into the internet, the codes that anytime that you prompt in ChatGPT, that code, that information, that data is being used to build further models of AI. Sorry. Oh, that's real blurry. I don't know what's up with that. This is just a little model, different types of models. You have the natural language processing, the large language models, deep learning, and machine learning. Natural language processing processes and understands human language. Those are like chatbots. Machine learning is like algorithms that learn from data. Deep learning is using neural networks to learn in complex patterns. And large language models are AI models that process and generate human-like language, like ChatGPT. And this is the death cycle of AI. This is really what the level of extraction required to build out generative AI. So you see mining on indigenous lands for minerals like lithium, cobalt, uranium, raw materials that make AI hardware possible. Those are extremely extractive. I'm sure that you all are aware of the mining industry and how harmful it is to communities globally. And then you see these massive facilities that are consuming land, water, and electricity. They're the physical backbone of artificial intelligence. These data centers are consuming hundreds to thousands of acres for the possibility of artificial superintelligence. Billions of gallons of water used to cool AI infrastructure. That's water from our local ecosystems, our creeks, our drinking water. They cannot use the water out of the ditch or your wastewater. They have to use your tap water, and they put tons and tons of chemicals in there. Uranium from native lands. You all know about nuclear that uranium is mined on native lands. And then rising computation requires more servers and energy and accelerates extraction, infrastructure, and scale. And then it is also used, generative AI is used by police, border patrol, at the state, tracking, repression, displacement, and cognitive decline. There have been studies that show that kids that use generative AI like ChatGPT on a daily basis have a permanent cognitive decline. They lack creativity after sustained usage of ChatGPT. There have been recent studies about this. Acceleration of time, labor consumption, faster production, faster burnout, and faster collapse. And then more demand equals more data centers, more mining, the cycle intensifies and returns to extraction. And then the degradation of attention, memory, critical thought, and the reliance on AI reshapes human cognition and agency. And these are some of the minerals that are used in data centers. You see minerals like arsenic, silver, gold, copper. There's a bunch of other ones, aluminum, copper.
Lead. Lead.
Yeah, lead. Yeah, all of those have to be mined to produce chips. They have to be produce these chips, and in order to keep these chips cool and keep them from frying, that's why you see these vast amounts of water to cool off these chips, because they're incredibly expensive to mine, to produce, and they want to keep those chips as cool as possible. And this is the hidden cycle of data center cooling. A lot of these data centers will tell you that they use closed loop systems, but in digging further into what a closed loop system, you'll see that these facilities take in a ton of water, and they also release a ton of water, and they have to recycle these systems every single day. So when they say closed loop, it's not actually closed loop. They cause this evaporation into the air, which is like a chemical buildup, and they have to release the brine into a waste pond, which again pollutes the environment. So this is a term that we have heard a lot recently, especially around data centers in Oklahoma. They're starting to say that these data centers will be water positive. And in looking into what water positivity means, they're using this term in communities that they're taking a ton of water from that are drought prone. They're saying that they can restore watersheds and that will offset their water usage. You've heard this term mainly in like carbon offsetting, where companies that produce a ton of pollution will buy land elsewhere, mainly on indigenous lands, to offset the amount of carbon that they're producing. And this is the exact same thing. You can't recycle polluted water. On top of the amount of PFAs and chemicals that they put in that will not be removed from this system, you can't restore watersheds and also remove the pollution at the same time when they're the ones actively polluting the systems. Why are we seeing this? We're seeing attacks on regulations and protections at the federal level. Big Tech is actively working with your federal governments, your state governments, and sometimes even your tribal governments. We've seen this a lot in different tribal communities across the country. NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, restricting NHPA, the Natural Historic Preservation Act, limiting the Clean Water, Clean Air, and Endangered Species Act, eliminating regulations through permitting reform, pushing unlimited fossil fuel mining and nuclear projects, using non-disclosure agreements to hide plans and impacts, subsidizing projects with billions of dollars, and working with bloc states from regulating AI and more. What is this technology being used for, and what kind of data is being stored, sold, and bought? It's being used for surveillance mainly. You're seeing this in play. Palestine really became a testing ground for a lot of the militarism of AI that we see now. Anything that you put in ChatGPT remains the product of ChatGPT forever. That goes the same with any AI system that you use. Anything that you put on social media remains the ownership of whatever company you are using. Data centers entrench the surveillance state. Every private conversation you share with ChatGPT is forever recorded and can be shared with authorities if asked. A significant percentage of AI power goes to surveillance apparatus like facial recognition and location tracking. We have seen where grandmothers have been mistakenly picked up on facial recognition. They've been taken to jail. They've been put in jail for a couple of months. And it turns out that these facial recognition facial recognition that they're using is tracking the wrong person. So we're seeing a lot of that happening more frequently because we're seeing systems like Flock being used more frequently. For those of you that are unaware, Flock is those little black cameras all over communities. Those use systems like AI as well. Again, the U.S. military was formed to crush indigenous resistance and then expanded abroad. With the current annual budget of $1 trillion, military-backed imperialism enables the data center industry through violent extraction seen today in places like Congo with cobalt, Palestine for gas, Sudan for gold, and Venezuela for oil. In turn, big tech and data centers directly support the military-industrial complex, national security, and military readiness are used to justify forever wars of extraction and exploitation. Also, they're using generative AI like Flock and ChatGPT to assist ICE in abductions. So you'll see a lot of conversations around how hyperscale data centers will positively impact your local economies. However, that is patently false. There are states that are making up for millions to billions of lost tax revenue. Of course, lost tax revenue affects everything in your state, from your roads to your schools, everything like that. Some areas are seeing 267% rate increases. And yeah, data centers carry deep financial risks of stranded assets, and investors like Blue Owl have pulled backing for projects because they can't sustain the financial risks. There's a lot of pushback on these hyperscale data centers, and that's costing them a lot of money. And they're in fact losing money because these systems are mostly free, and they're not able to provide profit on that. There's no evidence that these job promises are being fulfilled. Where initial jobs in construction may exist, permanent jobs are significantly less. In many fields, AI technologies are replacing human labor. Many companies in this industry, like Amazon, have already reported mass layoff of their employees. Also, Meta is also laying off employees as well. 10% of its employees. Indigenous lands, rural, and fossil fuel frontline communities are being targeted, and we're not sacrifice zones. They pollute our lands, They pollute our waters, they take our waters, and they promise us all of this money and all of these job opportunities for lower income communities, and that's just wrong. And this is, I'm just going to talk a little bit briefly about data sovereignty. You're hearing this a lot, especially in tribal communities, that we need to build data centers in order to be data sovereign. However, in my belief, that would require a tribe to do a full assessment of what kind of capacity your needs are. You don't need a hyperscale data center, just FYI. Indigenous data sovereignty became as a movement to control the takeover of our own data from colonizer institutions like the federal government and academia, and it's an anti-extractive movement. Data sovereignty is based on the autonomy of personhood for Native peoples. Data sovereignty requires consent and collective agreements. And I will say that you cannot allow a tribal government to fully make all of the decisions on your behalf. You have to have informed consent from the entire community before you create these agreements and what data sovereignty means for your community. So these are just the care principles of data sovereignty, Indigenous data sovereignty. C is for collective benefit, A is for authority to control, R is for responsibility, and E is for ethics. And I'll pass it over to Kenzie.
Stay homologated to heat dos. Kinji Roberts to Hajifkudos. Go to Amalegados. Woman of Yaminodos. Yarika Amila Hampidos. So hello, it's good to see all of you. My name is Kenzie Roberts. My clan is Wurkwa, which is raccoon, and I belong to Abika ceremonial grounds down in Oklahoma. So I always make sure to introduce myself first from my community and my people, because Cherokee is a very rural community, and so I'm very passionate about rural economic development, and especially things that happen to rural communities, because people think that there's nobody there and they don't matter. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about cultural impacts from artificial intelligence and hyperscale data centers. So the first one, we're talking about culture. So, I talk about relationship to the work and community ownership. So, first and foremost, for us as Muscogee, we have, September and October is Big Chestnut Thrashing Month, Little Chestnut Thrashing Month. Back in the day, we would throw up thrashing sticks to the hickory nut trees and let those sticks hit the branches. What the trees were willing to give us and able to give us, they would, and what they needed to keep, but wasn't ready for us yet, the trees kept. In that way, it is a way that we as Muscogee engage in sacred consent, right? And so, almost just about every tribe has their own protocols and procedures of sacred consent. You don't take more than you need. You make sure that you leave, enough for everybody to receive that abundance. And so with data centers, particularly, that is directly antithetical, to many of our beliefs as Indigenous people, particularly because the water consumption, it cannot replenish itself fast enough. Most of the time, these are being cooled through evaporation. Hot water is being sprayed in these big towers, and through evaporation, it starts to cool it down, within those big towers. Well, whenever it's, evaporating to that degree, it's running 24/7, without any stop, that water goes out and it doesn't replenish itself fast enough due to the just sheer consumption of these data centers. So whenever we talk about that, that goes against many of our beliefs. Relationship to the work as well. I understand that there's many different, practices, arts, even, food practices, like those delicious ramps that we just had. So a lot of these different, food practices and cultural practices, the work is the point, right? We are being pushed this narrative of productivity, that faster, more, exported, more expedited, that is the way of the future, and that is something that, we should subscribe to. But, for us as Indigenous people, the work is the point. The process is the point. Getting to know your land, getting to know the clay in your areas, the woods in your areas, the plant relatives in your areas, all of that is the point. And so whenever we're being pressed and, this narrative that that faster, bigger, better, is the way of the future, that is also antithetical to many of our beliefs as well. The last thing about culture is community ownership. So with ChatGPT and OpenAI, they explicitly say that anything that you teach these large language models, they own. So you think about any type of iconography, Mississippian iconography, even back home in Muskogee territory, we have some of our departments using Muskogean, Mississippian iconography, putting it into ChatGPT to get a T-shirt for something. Even though we have tons of very talented, very accomplished Muskogean artists, within our communities, they don't understand that through that narrative of profitability, through that narrative of progression, they are feeding an exploitative entity all of our information, all of our cultural information, and as a result, they own it. So those sons, those Muskogean knots, those Mississippian knots, all of those different things, whenever they put it into ChatGPT, they own it. And if they own it, then somebody else is able to extract from that. Somebody else is able to emulate it in a different way. Just like Shai earlier was talking about it being predictive text, it's not researching all these different things. It's saying what something might look like, would look like this answer. And so if you think about all of that, and you think about the imagery that is being pilfered away from us, it is extremely dangerous. Because what if somebody would be looking up these symbols? Some of them are related to pregnancy, some of them are related to death, some are related to birth and reincarnation. What would happen if somebody wanted to get a tattoo? Googled it, put it in ChatGPT, get something that's not good for their spirit, something that's not good for their people, something that's bad medicine, because they don't understand, because ChatGPT gave them the wrong answer, right? So, this next part, language. So I put Ojibwe Mullen and Muskogee Ogunaga. So one of my friends, Danielle Boyer, she is the CEO, founder of STEAM Connection, and they have these really keen little scobots, and they're language learning models, but they're very small, they're contained, they're not connected to any bigger data center whatsoever, but the intent behind it is to teach people, her Anishinaabe language. And in that endeavor, it's been reinvented to teach other people, their native languages. And there's this really wonderful interview with her talking about large language models and ChatGPT, because a lot of people think that if you feed these languages into ChatGPT, it's an avenue to language revitalization and preservation. They think that it's going to help save the language, but in reality, it is corrupting it to such a degree that if another beginner language learner were to be introduced to any of those hits from ChatGPT, they'd be learning a completely different language. They'd be learning a language that is not grounded in any type of cultural, sufficiency, any type of, real linguistic history, that is connected to that language family even. So with Ojibwe Mullen, they take into consideration everything above them, below them, around them, because they're a very contextual language. ChatGPT has no concept of that. They can't do that. And as a result, it's creating different words in Ojibwe and Anishinaabe. And so that is very, very dangerous for those of us who are passionate about language revitalization, because we want people to be able to speak the right way so that way it can live on like it already has been, like our people have already ensured it to do, right? And so I also put Muskogee Obunaga because right now, in our Muskogee language groups, we're dealing with this issue. There are wonderful people that are really passionate about language revitalization and teaching and learning, and so they made these little journal entries of vocabulary words, and they get really, really popular. There's like 250 to 300 likes on each of those posts. It's like a 5,000 person group. It's really, really popular. Well, the issue with that is some of these vocabulary words are incorrect. And so there was one day where we were talking about outside. We were talking about the weather. For Muskogee, our word for climate is oholoji. For us, our word for sun and month is hazi. So this person was corrected in our language groups out of love, right? Because we want them to be on the correct path, most of all. And this person doubled down and said, well, ChatGPT told me. Not an elder, not a Mahaya, not a teacher. ChatGPT told me that I could say it like this. They were saying it as ohologi. That doesn't make sense in the Muskogean alphabet. If you put all these words, these letters together, it phonetically does not make those words, those sounds. And it was also saying that it could also mean cloud and sun and month. You could say ohologi and hazi and be saying the same thing, according to ChatGPT. There's a reason why they're separate. There's a reason why some of these words, like hoshotdeda, is related to sun, because of the linguistic history, the linguistic tradition that has sustained and maintained these languages since time immemorial. But we give them to ChatGPT, and suddenly the people that have been stewarding it for generations are the people that know the least. What happened there? Food sovereignty. So whenever we're talking about a data center in the Muskogee territory, they're really wanting to rezone our leading food sovereignty initiative, Loop Square Ranch, 5,500 acres purchased with the original intention to give stewards to the land, to create food sovereignty and promote it for our communities, so that way we could take care of our people. We could ensure that our people could have good, healthy food to eat at an accessible, in an accessible place, at an accessible way. And so whenever they talked about rezoning, so many of these acres into a data center park, with room to expand, because that's the idea. It's never just one. They always say, we're just going to do one. It's never only one. They always push and push, give them an inch till they take a mile. That's what you can think of with these data centers. So we, the people, were very upset. One of the biggest reasons why people pushed back so much is because many of our communities within our reservation are food deserts. According to the USDA, within about a mile for urban people and within about 10 miles for rural people, that is what is described as a food desert. And so for my community, Ardika, we're 11 miles away from the nearest supermarket. And that supermarket has extortionate prices, to where if you're on a fixed income, if you're on SSI, if you're on disability, it's very, very difficult for you to eat healthy. It is very, very difficult for you to get food, in general. And so instead of sustainable regenerative agriculture, instead of a sustainable, economy, because everybody's got to eat, right? They, were humoring the idea of a data center. And so whenever tribes are thinking about this is the way to diversify our economic development, this is the way to diversify away from tourism and gaming, I would recommend them do a community needs assessment, because, I feel as though if our tribes did a community needs assessment, they would see that the predominant need for our people is food accessibility. Because if you look at a map of Muskogee Nation, it's 11 counties. The top half, the north half, is very, very urban. But the bottom half where I live is very, very rural. And so these stories, like I'm telling you right now, you know, I'm only one experience. But many other people that live the same way that I do is experiencing the exact same thing, the exact same inaccessibility, the exact same divide between healthy and unhealthy food. And the tribes have the opportunity to intervene. So these next two, you know, really go together, their memory and cognitive impacts. Recently, there was a study with MIT, and this researcher, her name is Natalia Morowina. I cannot remember her last name right now, but she noticed that whenever she was looking for interns, she studies the relationship between humans and technology. So whenever she was doing, recruiting for an internship, at her office, she was noticing that these cover letters that she was getting all looked very, very similar. They had the same structure. At the very beginning, they were introducing themselves. They had some weird, almost non-relevant, paragraph about their proximity to her work. And then it just went into, the rest of their application. She was like, why are these so familiar? Why are these so similar? And then she was looking more at her students. And she found that her students, they weren't retaining the information as long as they used to. In fact, they were forgetting it much quicker than she had been used to in all of her years of teaching. And so she found, her and her colleagues at the MIT Media Lab decided to do a study, and they recruited about 54 students. Those 54 students were broken up into 3 groups. One was to use ChatGPT, one was to use Google, and one was to just use their mind. So they were given these very abstract prompts. They weren't having to do with really any research aspect whatsoever. What does happiness mean to you? What is joyful to you? Things like that. And so she found, they did, a scan on their brains, these 3 different groups. What they found was the first group, who wasn't able to use ChatGPT, their brains were on fire. Every part of their brain was activated, The second group, who used Google, their brains were less active, in these different spots, but they were still active because there was still part of the brain that had to do something. But whenever she looked at the people that only used ChatGPT and nothing else, she found that their brain capacity was reduced by 55% over the entire area of the brain. And so we're seeing from ChatGPT, not using it whatsoever, so much of your brain is activated, to see how little of your brain is activated whenever you rely on ChatGPT like that. That's where that cognitive atrophy, which I have right here, comes into play. Because, think about exercising a muscle. You need to rip those muscle fibers, rest, let them build back up, but it's a continuous thing. That's how you build muscle. Your brain is the same way. But instead of muscle fibers tearing, it's, your neurotransmitters, your neurons. And so and your neuroplasticity. And so whenever you do these hard things, whenever you have a puzzle to solve, whenever you have a word problem to solve, whenever you're looking at something on the internet, trying to research something, that's what creates that neuroplasticity. Even Sudoku, crossword puzzles, different things like that, people encourage those things as you get older. That is to maintain and exercise your neuroplasticity. Whenever you're doing those things with ChatGPT and you're having that cognitive offloading of that labor, then it's really difficult to keep exercising your neuroplasticity. And then that's where we see that brain atrophy, where it's much more difficult for your cognitive, your reasoning, your problem-solving skills, and your memory. And so really quickly, I just wanted to go through these Indian country wins. So this first one was last year. Me, Jordan, Shai, and our members of our the Oklahoma members of our coalition worked really hard to defeat this Muskogee Tech Park. The way we mobilize is, a series of town halls very similar to these. We emailed our representatives. At the very end, we staged a rally, and it died on the floor 9-4. So that was a really wonderful, big day for us. And then the second, Seminole Nation of Oklahoma passed a moratorium just last month. They got wind that an NDA was being put up on their agenda. They weren't really told about it. They kind of found out, much like us, on Facebook. And so the next week or so, we planned a town hall. We invited, all the representatives that we possibly could, and many of them were there. And after hearing some responses from the community after presentation, very similar to this, the principal chief, Yellowhill decided to pull it back off of the agenda. And then in turn, with that off of the agenda, our good friend and colleague, Siobhan Colonel, decided to verbally ask for a moratorium in their homeland, in their reservation, and that passed unanimously. So not only was that NDA taken off the agenda completely, they ended up passing a moratorium. And this last one right here, community pushback prompts Salt Tribe leadership to adopt a moratorium on data centers. So this also just happened very, very recently. And I have a really good friend up there who I was seeing posting their flyers about data centers, their flyers about town halls, and what they were thinking up there. And their posts were very, very active. They self-organized up there to put pressure on their representatives to create this legislation, much like we did for our representatives, much like you all can do here for your representatives, right? These are three examples of what happens whenever we fight back, because when we fight, we win, and that's what happened here. So we just wanted to, show these things and talk a little bit about the cultural pacts, to really ground us in why we're here, at all today, why we want to defend our lands to begin with, and especially what can happen whenever you come together with your community and, use your voice. So,
And then for our very last slide is just community strategies for fighting the data centers. So number one, you all have a moratorium already on the table, and the best way you can do to support that is contact your council reps, keep on them, make them feel like they're going to lose their election if they don't pass this, because the data center issue is an electoral issue. People are going to lose their seats, and people are going to win seats based on this alone. Pressuring city council and county commissioners. So a lot of the same strategies at your tribe can also work at the city or county. So if you have neighboring counties that a data center proposal pops up and you want to help fight them, try to engage in those counties, support their efforts. You can take this information that you learned today and share it with your neighbors, share it with the people you know, empower them with the knowledge that they can also fight it. Emails, phone calls, and bird dogging. I mean, sometimes we just show up and make Meta feel uncomfortable, and that's what we did. They had a big announcement in Tulsa last week right before we came here to announce what we already knew, which was that Meta is the company behind Project Anthem, and they were going to donate some money to a nonprofit to try to bribe our community, and we just showed up and ruined their day. Running oppositional candidates. If you have an elected official or a candidate supporting data centers, get them out, get someone new in. Of course, attending city council and commission meetings. The commission meetings are very important because a lot of the times this is where the process begins. First, the commission either rezones or provides recommendations, and a lot can be done on that level before it ever gets to the city council, but every county is different. Public rallies and protests should always follow, the backdoor efforts first. So get educated, educate your people, contact your council reps, and once they know that's what you want, then you host a rally and get the media involved. Requesting a moratorium, you can do that on the city level, the county level, even the state level. The state of Maine just passed a moratorium on data centers. They were the first state to do so, and their governor vetoed it. So data centers are getting away with really easy zoning because in a lot of places they're classified as light industrial because historically they've been small and have had not a lot of impact on their neighbors. So hyperscale data centers are being zoned as light industry even though they can take up thousands of acres and use millions of gallons of water per day. And so update that zoning law. As soon as they're zoned as heavy industry, now their permitting process is a little bit more rigorous. Delay and postpone. This worked in the city of Qualla, which is about 30 minutes outside of Tulsa. Beale Infrastructure proposed a 200 acre data center there. The community protested, they had petitions, they showed up to council meetings, and the developer pulled out. It just wasn't worth it to them anymore. Lawsuits. This is a big one. This is hard because a lot of these fights can be won in the courtroom. It's not always accessible for our communities to get legal support to do it. However, sometimes it's successful. So there's a citizens group lawsuit against the city of Sand Springs that has to do with the way they annex the land. So one thing that's happening in Oklahoma is a city will purchase land outside of their boundaries, and usually in a rural county. Then they will annex it into the city. So now they can zone it and they can tax it, but the people who live next door to the facility don't get a vote. And then engaging your tribal council members and attending their meetings. And then this last thing, this is the Honor the Earth. This is the Honor the Earth Data Center Toolkit. You'll see our fact sheet, Honor the Earth's fact sheet on there. We also have a printed out version over here if you didn't get it. If you signed up on our sign-in sheet, we can email a copy of the slides we had today. There's even more. There's a nuclear fact sheet. There's alternative resources to Google and Apple. That's really valuable right there. And then, of course, you know, get your kids, your youth, and even your elders to just stop using AI. It's not needed. Honor's hashtag is Ask Your Auntie, not AI. I think that we've already provided a lot of reasons why that we need to do that. Oh yeah, so there's a template presentation here. That'll take you to Canva, and you can use that for your own town halls as a starting point. And there's also actually a data center tracker, and you can click there, and it shows where data centers are being built. Like, there's the map. I don't know why it's kind of weird on my computer. Where they're being built near tribal lands, and you can fill out a form and add any if you know of any that need it. So this is a good resource just to keep that. Anything to add before we go to questions?
I'm ready for questions.
Okay, we're ready for questions now. Thank you so much for being patient. Yeah.
What is GPT?
Oh yeah, good question. So ChatGPT, if you're not already familiar with it, is an AI app developed by OpenAI. Is that Sam Altman?
Yes.
So Sam Altman is the billionaire. He owns OpenAI. He developed, it's a chatbot. You can use it on the computer. You can download it on your phone. It's a large language model. That means that it uses hyperscale data centers to extract data 24/7, and it basically just scrapes the internet. It takes data non-consensually. It can generate images. It can generate text. It's frequently inaccurate. Not to mention, when you enter in a prompt in ChatGPT, it uses water because it's using the hyperscale data centers to extract the data to generate the response. Yeah, it's like pouring a bottle of water on the ground. And it actually uses like 5 times more water than a regular Google search uses.
So is it a search engine?
It's a chat bot, so you can type a question into it and it will like answer you. It'll try to answer you as if it was a human with text, or you can ask it to generate images.
When you get on your phone and you like, if you go to Mr. Whatever and it pulls it up and it says Meta wants to, you can tap that. That's what it is. It sends you to ChatGPT automatically. You can disable those on your phone too.
There's a lot of terminology used in this whole presentation that was way over my head.
Oh
And
yeah,
I'm
no, that's fair.
61.
Yeah.
So trying to receive this information and hold questions, especially when you don't know what you said, and it's repeated over and over, it makes it difficult to follow your presentation,
Yeah.
if that helps you.
No, it does. Sorry about that as well. And a lot of times we're presenting this in communities that are already fighting data centers, so they're kind of already used to the language. So we'll definitely take that in consideration. So thank you for that. Yeah. Any other questions?
I just got a comment about ChatGPT.
The GPT.
I heard you say general, I was gonna say General Mills. But they also use it in the schools, because they said when they have term papers, that they could tell it, go on that site, and it will write your term paper for you. The schools, schools are against it, and of course, if you get caught using it in your classes and stuff, they will either fail you or suspend you or whatever, because it's that. It's, yes.
You need your statement to be read. You can put your information in the ChatGPT and it'll write a whole statement for you. All you have to do is add a bullet points. It's not good though, because you're wasting water, and it's stuff that somebody can do regularly. It's just gonna take you a little time to use your brain. But that's, yeah, you could just throw in little bullet points and it'll print out a whole statement, like based on the little bullet points you put in there.
So the way that it like accumulates all that information and produces what you see when you ask it a question, and it prints you out, or it gives you an email or whatever, it's scraping data from the entire internet and producing something that you may want to use, or you think it thinks that you want to hear. There's been a lot of cases where ChatGPT has been used as a therapist, and ultimately has led to people committing suicide. So it's incredibly dangerous, because these systems are created in order to produce reliance on these systems. And it makes you want to keep going back and keep using it, because it affirms what you want to hear.
And it seems to me that if after you get 3 or 4 generations of that, then people will become solely dependent, and then human beings become like robots.
Yeah, there's been evidence that thoughts are homogenized. All the thoughts become the same after all of the people that use ChatGPT, their thoughts become homogenized and the same, basically.
Yeah, it's worth noting that these large language models are doing this every time they're used. So if you start asking it a question, it starts from square one basically every time. It's not an iterative thing. It might learn how to phrase things better, but it's starting its answer from scratch each time, and it's not producing something that it fact checks. It's producing something that's believable and passable, and it's very vulnerable to data corruption. Because it's looking at everything, it can't tell the difference between good information and bad. So it creates this vicious cycle where someone will use ChatGPT to produce articles that might be riddled with misinformation, and then when someone asks that same question again to write another article, it references the bullshit. So you'll have this back-feeded loop of corrupted data, and it does that, as you can all see, with our language. It does that with cultural elements, and it's resulting in not only academic plagiarism, but also in politicians being disconnected from reality, because they'll ask a chatbot instead of an actual consultant for something. And this is being used by politicians as a means of undermining democracy, because it's making people think less, it's making people critically challenge things less, and it's producing a false sense of security for people in looking up their information, while being statistically less likely than, or statistically less accurate than search engines are. So there are no benefits to using this over the already excellent technologies, even if we were looking at this from a purely mechanical gain perspective.
Go for that. And really quickly, I just wanted to add that it's not just ChatGPT. ChatGPT is probably one of the most popular that's being used, but there are different, they're called LLMs. So yeah, LLM, large language model. That's one of the different 6 types of artificial intelligence. And so some of the other ones are like Grok, Claude, Gemini, Acrobat. So those are just some things that, it's not just GPT, and if you see it, on the internet or something, like Acrobat, Gemini, you know that it's the same thing.
How do we know?
We don't.
How do we know that this is there in your presentation that we sign up for on email? Do you have a sheet that says Chat GPT and the definition of what it is and what those other ones you just listed? Do you have a sheet like that?
We do not, but I appreciate that recommendation, because I like that.
Yeah, we can work on putting that list together and getting that to you. We're posting it on the website where we post all this information. We do have a list of alternates, like Google is automatic. There's a lot of systems that are automatically integrating AI into everyday things that you use. You're seeing it on things like Facebook, Instagram, Google, and it's just automatically in there. But there's a list of alternates to use. Like there's an alternate for Google, which is DuckDuckGo, that you can turn off AI features for. Yeah.
I would love that.
Yeah.
Yes. Are there any kind of data centers currently on kind of the lands of any federally recognized tribes?
Are there any data centers that are currently on federally recognized tribes?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
There's a lot. There are some in the territories in Oklahoma that are being proposed. The jurisdiction issue is complicated. I'll just say that they are in our territories. There's also an initiative by an Indian energy company, I'll just name it Qualla USA, where they're working with the Department of Indian Energy to manufacture consent from tribes in order to, what they say, diversify their energy. But really they're coming in and building data centers in order to subsidize the need for energy diversification. Citizen Potawatomi. The map that we have on our website will show you all of the data centers that are proposed on or near native lands, and those are within 30 miles of native lands.
Okay, so those are proposed, but I guess my question was, are there any currently running?
There are some, but there's one in Cherokee Nation that is not a hyperscale data center, but it is a large data center.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, so I just wanted to touch on our tribe's use of AI. I work for the language program, and there's curriculum that doesn't exist, but that's what they're trying to use right now is ChatGPT to create lesson plans and stuff like that. So we pushed back on that. But I also want to point out, it's like we're so short-staffed in many departments that is an excuse that they're using to use these things. So I do think that the tribe, our people, do need to be speaking up about that because we're using it. They're already using it to create so many things that I think our people are not aware of. And we are moving forward with AI language programs, and that's Cherokee. And we pushed back on that as students, and we were removed from the project. So they wanted us to look at the Cherokee because we were in the more advanced part of the language, so you can hear those nuances and can understand like what she's talking about. There's roots to them. There's not just roots in literacy, like what is it called? I can't remember. So language. Linguistics. Yeah, there's not just linguistic roots in there. They come from our original instructions, and you can't plug that in to this AI data center, whatever it takes in all this information, and we push back on that because they tried to convince us that when we don't have speakers, we'll be able to go to Cherokee and be able to speak to our speakers, and we are disgusted by that because we can do it right now, and if we're going to have that, if we have that time and we have that energy, that money, then we need to be doing that and not infusing it into AI because you cannot program these nuances without knowing the language, without living it, and a lot of us are still just learning it. They don't have the speakers tied to these things, to be plugging these things in. We have speakers to consult, but it's not the speakers that are directly plugging this in. So there's a huge problem with what we're doing in our language program right now, and it's called Cherokee. our tribe has already adopted it. We're already pushing forward, but I want you guys to be aware of that. Second language learners did push back on it, and we were removed from the project. There were certain people on it that weren't speaking it. Matter of fact, one of us got rid of it.
I'll just say that anything that is put into these systems stays there forever and is further used to extrapolate data, and it can lead to data exploitation, and that's why when I'll just generate an image in ChatGPT and you say, give me Indians or whatever on here, they'll just come up with a generic TP and they'll say that they need our data in order to make these systems better, but really they're taking our data in order to further their generative models. I saw a couple questions.
Yeah, she was first.
I think if you do that and you just put in your own name, you'll be real interested to see what comes up. But my original comment was, I am originally from Monument Valley, Utah, Four Corners, and those we're known for our uranium. The majority of my family, the males, have worked in the uranium mine, and I live 5 miles from the White Mesa mill, and our president signed and allowed the mining company over in the Grand Canyons to transport right through the beds. And all the local people in the community were so rural, we don't even have internet, no water, no power, so they're real clueless and don't even know that this is going on. And the big trucks that are hauling them don't even have covers on them. So it's just blowing just in the air when you drive behind them. They don't have any plans for if there's an accident or emergency. There's been protests going on. There's still protests. We still have walks in front of protests and walks from right before White Mesa entrance. But White Mesa is the Ute Mountain Ute people. That's they have a little plot of land. It's kind of like Snowbird. Their main ones in Colorado, but they have a little section, and they're the ones that have allowed the White Mesa mill to continue.
Yeah, big tech companies are like heavily investing in small modular reactor technologies. Small modular reactors are basically, you may know this, but they're basically nuclear reactors that fit inside of a semi-truck. And those actually don't, they aren't in existence. There's no evidence that these have been used outside of naval ships. And they're heavily investing in these, trying to say that they're more safe, they use less waste. However, neither of those is true, and they also don't produce enough energy. One thing that I forgot to mention is that your state is proposing legislation called Behind the Meter. They just completed a feasibility study for Behind the Meter. And basically what Behind the Meter is it allows industrial companies to produce energy behind the meter. So it produces energy on site. And that's why tech companies are heavily investing in small modular reactors. They think it's going to be more cheap. They think that it's going to produce enough energy for them to run these facilities without using the grid, basically. And that will lead to further mining and further extraction from your home communities. I have one over here and then.
Yes. I was just going to thank Elvia for kind of bringing up that point, and I was just going to ask, are you guys aware of any tribal nations that have banned the use of AI within kind of the tribal government or tribal schools or programs?
So very recently, we were brought to the attention that Seminole Nation, the principal chief, has issued an email to the different departments that they cannot make AI flyers, generated flyers, or things of that nature, especially the flyers for outreach events from the different departments. So that is one, and though some of the council members that we've spoken to, they've yet to see that email, unfortunately, but that is something that people have been bringing to our attention, that is, one of the concrete ones that we know that either, has been happening or, is trying to happen over there.
Thank you.
I don't know if this has anything to do with your presentation, but I've wondered about all of these acres and acres and acres and acres of solar panels in different parts of the country. And there are places that I've been to, like in Florida, there are miles of solar panels. And I've just wondered how that affects the earth. I mean, it might be drawing the sun's energy, and it might be good for the people that are using it. But I'm wondering what it's doing to the earth that, that it's sitting on.
Yeah, that is a good question, and it is related to data centers. And real quick, I just looked up and saw that Shoshone-Bannock tribes have proposed an AI policy, like restricting its use. And then the Cherokee Nation does have an AI policy, not banning it, but kind of regulating it, I guess. But the solar farms, yeah, so large solar farms and wind farms are examples of greenwashing, where they are promoted as sustainable renewable energy that lessens the impact on land, but it ignores the actual impact of large-scale energy generation, which includes the mining for the materials, the transportation of materials, which, as you just heard, can have huge impacts on communities, and then, like you said, the land itself. So the components in a large solar farm, some of them can be toxic, like the metals involved. There's fire risks, and so when something like that catches a data center or a solar farm catches on fire, it releases toxic chemicals into the air, and it also requires certain types of fire suppressants. You can't just use water to put out a fire like that. You actually have to use toxic chemicals to suppress the fire. And then there's just the use of the land itself. So like I used Georgia as an example, where they took 500 acres of beautiful conservation land, mowed it down, chopped down all the trees, and put a solar farm there so that they could use that energy for the data center. Now, it's complicated because a lot of communities are still implementing solar on a small scale as a way to have some type of energy that doesn't have to rely solely on fossil fuels. And that's why at the beginning of the presentation, we start off with the scaling of the data centers, because you can have a small little server just for one tribe or one building even, all the way up to thousands of acres. This scalable issue also applies to power generation itself, where there's no such thing as a perfectly renewable power generation. It does not exist. There is no such thing as power generation, whether it's hydro, solar, wind, that is totally sustainable with zero impact and zero emissions. That is a fairy tale. It doesn't exist. The only way to reduce the impact is to reduce the demand. We don't need hyperscale data centers driving up the demand for energy 24/7. We don't need to build more nuclear power plants to provide energy to communities. They need to work on connection issues for rural communities. They need to work on things like, fiber optic lines. They need to work on things like clean water in communities. And so, you're absolutely right in flagging that those huge solar farms, they have permanent impacts on the land that they're sitting on. And it's actually kind of difficult to repurpose that land for any other use. After you put that on there, that's pretty much what it has to be used for, or something industrial. So when they rezone, it's really sad when they rezone conservation land or undeveloped land, but then also they're paying for agriculture land to put the solar farms on and stuff like that. questions or comments?
Okay, I have a logistics question. First, thank you so much for this toolkit. I'm really excited to dig into that because I'm from just across the mountain in Tennessee, and we're trying to launch an information campaign for folks about these data centers. Most people just don't know. So thank you for that. I'm very, very excited. As far as for some of us who may not be very much into the application processes in our communities, where can we look to try to identify these NDAs or these other permitting officers? Who should we talk to?
If you can, if your county, your city has publicly accessible information on their agenda packets, you can usually trace something in the agendas or their packets that they provide with the agendas. However, that's not always easily, readily accessible. It's sometimes very hard to find information. I'm not sure what your state's regulations are around the Open Records Act, but that's where I've been able to find a lot of information about our local developments is just directly requesting a FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act, with the county or the city where the proposed data center is. And then requesting any documentation or communication from your city councilors, county commissioners, school boards with the developers once you find out that information.
Okay, thank you.
And I will say that one of our biggest challenges has been the NDAs and the timing of these projects. So by the time the public is made aware of the zoning request, it's already been in the works for 1 or 2 years. And so that's something we're all facing and trying to challenge that, trying to hold them to the FOIA laws, which they don't always want to follow.
I have a question about what's the difference in us asking for a ban or us asking for a moratorium?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a moratorium and a ban are kind of the same thing. They can be used interchangeably, but typically a moratorium comes with an expiration date. So a lot of cities and counties are doing like a 9-month moratorium, which would be just like a pause. They're not going to rezone, they're not going to give a permit to any new data center development for 9 months or 1 year. And whereas a permanent ban would be like, this is indefinite until we repeal it. And there are cities and counties where I don't know yet if I legally agree with this, but they don't feel like they're allowed to permanently ban certain kinds of industry. So they could issue a moratorium, but their city attorneys are advising them that legally they have to have an expiration date on that pause. I don't think the tribe is restricted as much on that. I think the tribe is allowed to ban industry if they want to.
What if industry takes that ban, because the ban is effective and it's law, and we have to follow it no matter how, and we put a word in there that can be a loophole for someone, and they can get around that, as opposed to a moratorium that can change, and we can catch those loopholes and those others, and extend and get more moratoriums. That's my only question.
Well, so a ban can also be amended just like a moratorium. Your council can do whatever they want. They can say, we're gonna ban this, and then 6 months later, if they wanna add 6 more things to the list, they can do that if they just pass a resolution, yeah.
Alvia asked if you could put our resolution that's up, if you could put it back up here. And she said, can you read it?
Yeah.
So we're going to read, what we have here is the ordinance that was submitted by Levita Yield, Co-Council Representative, Miss Vanita Wolf, and she is in our audience today. Vanita. Shannon Swimmer, the Payne Town Council Representative, and Chanel Feather, the Yellowhill Tribal Council Representative. So, I'm going to read this. It says, Cherokee Council House, Cherokee, North Carolina, April 2nd, 2026, ordinance number 158, 2026. An ordinance amending chapter 47E to ban data centers on EBCI, Eastern Band Cherokee Indian Tribal lands. Whereas Section 23 of the EBCI Charter and Governing Document vests Tribal Council with the power to adopt laws and regulations for the general government of the tribe, including governing the management of real and personal property held by the tribe, and whereas high-impact digital infrastructure facilities, herein referred to as data centers, present a clear and present danger to the lands and people of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, and whereas these facilities have often been forced on rural areas in western North Carolina and have made the quality of life considerably worse for those who live nearby them, and whereas these facilities require an enormous amount of water to operate, and we recognize that our water is sacred and should not be used for this purpose. And whereas it is well documented that these facilities create a humming sound which causes nearby residents to develop health problems of both physical and mental variety. And whereas, as we all know, we as the tribe have limited access land, and we believe that the land within the EBCI Trust and deeded land should be devoted to causes which help and uplift our people rather than harm them. And whereas we are stewards of our land and should be proactive in protecting it and our tribal members, and this ordinance amendment will accomplish the goal of enacting an indefinite moratorium on building, constructing, or maintaining these data centers. And now, therefore be it ordained that tribal council and annual council assembled, and with a quorum present as provided by law, hereby adopts the following ordinance amendment to Chapter 47E of the Cherokee Code. Chapter 47E5, Data Center Development Moratorium. The Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians finds and declares that nearby land has become a hub for data center development, and the exponential growth of these facilities has created a strain on essential resources and the power grid, jeopardizes finite water supplies, and presents a substantial risk to local infrastructure. Data centers create noise pollution from cooling systems and generators, impact local air quality from generator emissions, and requires massive power usage to operate. B, the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians finds that these data centers consume large tracts of land which are more appropriately used for other purposes which are beneficial to our people. Development of these centers on tribal lands would violate our role as stewards of our sacred lands. C, the current legal framework is inadequate to properly manage the scale and impact of this industry within tribal lands, and it is necessary to enact this legislation to protect the public health, safety, and well-being of the enrolled members of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. D, a data center is a large-scale facility. Campus of facilities are an array of interconnected facilities which house working servers and that are developed to cool, secure, and connect data associated with applications and services. E, a data center as defined in subsection D is hereby prohibited on EBCI trust lands, and no tribal infrastructure or resources shall be used or modified to aid in the building, construction, or maintenance of any data center. Service dues in the ordinary course of business for the tribal government, tribal entities, and legitimate business operating pursuant to a specified tribal business license are not data centers for the purpose of this moratorium. F, the moratorium shall remain in effect indefinitely. Be it further ordained that this ordinance is effective upon ratification of the principal chief. Be it finally ordained that all prior and consistent ordinances are rescinded. So that is what is coming up in our next session of council on May 7th, where council representatives will vote on this. It's been sitting on the floor for 25 days. So I wanted to read that. Plus, we have a relative here, Fred. Is that your name?
Yes.
Fred?
Yes.
Fred, you're a candidate, right, for Swain County?
Yes, Wayne County Chair of the Board of Commissioners. I'm candidate for that.
Yeah. So we, as Jordan said, you know, when people start talking about this in politics, And it's going to vote some people out, and it might vote some people in. But I want to refer to you as Mr. Fred. Came to our community club meeting at Yellowhill this month and gave a presentation and on data centers. So if you don't mind, I'd like to give you just a couple of minutes if you'd like to come and introduce yourself real quick. And thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. I didn't come expecting to speak, and so I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here. Thanks for giving me permission to do so. My name is Fred Crawford, and I am running for chair of the Swain County Board of Commissioners. And I started paying attention to this data center issue back in 2022 in Cherokee County when that cryptocurrency site was brought on board. And I realized back pretty quickly the reason that came on board there in Cherokee County was because Cherokee County had no zoning, no land development ordinances in place. And I know that Swain County also has no land development ordinances in place. And so that got my attention, knowing that something like that could happen pretty quickly. And just, I went out to Murphy to take a video of that site, and some people have seen that video on my Facebook page. It got viral, it's got crazy, but it impacted me because of how, a couple things. One, that cryptocurrency site uses no water. It runs on 14 megawatts of power. It sits on 3 acres. And at its gate, sitting at the gate, I registered on my watch here. It was on my decibels. It was at 92 decibels. Yeah. So I was concerned. I brought that back to our county commissioners, and they last Tuesday passed a moratorium on data centers in Swain County. So hold your applause, because all the moratorium does in Swain County is just put a pause. So that particular moratorium read, we got 1 year to develop land development ordinances to put in place to stop or severely regulate data centers. Luckily, the commissioners also took my recommendations to compress the timeline, make it a little faster. The proposed moratorium said 6 months just to develop these kind of, just to study the issue. I hurried them up on that. And I also asked them to incorporate a citizens advisory committee to help Swain County develop some sort of these land codes. They accepted both of my recommendations, and so that's happening. I would like to see a tribal citizen be part of that committee. So if you wouldn't mind going online, there's no application per se for that right now, but contact me and I'd be glad to point you in the right direction if you're interested in helping at Swain County. So I'll also say this, Graham County also has no land development ordinances, no zoning. I serve on the board of Main Spring Conservation Trust. We just conserved 4,500 acres in the Snowbird Mountains. I'm concerned about a data center coming into Graham County and ruining some of the very pristine properties that we just conserved there. So I'm going to ask for y'all's help too, to also speak to your representatives in Graham County and encourage them to move forward on a moratorium so they can also follow suit. So finally, I don't know if y'all remember the electric substation that was going to go over on Hyatt Creek Road. Y'all remember that?
Yes. We fought against it.
Yep. Because a lot of this conversation here can be, we're just talking about tribal lands and the boundary, but this affects the mother town, you know, right there. This affects adjacent lands. So I'm encouraging tribal citizens to be involved in this fight here in Swain County. And if y'all need any help or if there's anything I can do, please feel free to give me a holler. I've got cards here and be glad to talk to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Ray.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Before you stop, you at the community meeting, you had explained to us that once it gets started, it's hard to backtrack or stop it. Can you share a little bit about that? Because that blew my mind. I didn't know that.
Well, North Carolina law is has a lot of these little nuances that once a project is underway, then yes, you cannot stop it. Once that permit is accepted by the county, they're off and running. Especially in situations where there's so little land development ordinances.
Is to build allyship. And some of the work that we do here, because we are an isolated tribe, you know, a lot of our neighbors are non-native. But when we can work together, build the allyship, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. We all need clean water, we all need clean air, we all need clean land and good food. We need those things all together. So the more that we can support each other, build those allies, you know, gain information, that's what we have here. We have plenty of copies. Please take more than one, take as many as you can. As you said, they have a toolkit. If you added your email address, we can send that to you. But I just want to thank Jordan and Chai and Kinsey for coming all the way from Oklahoma to share their work with us. Yeah, I'm going to ask Ms. Bonita if she wanted to say anything in support of the legislation. So I'll give Bonita a little bit of time.
Thank you, everyone. Like, Frank, I was not prepared for this, so I came to support this effort. You all came to our meeting last night, our Community Connections meeting, and we talked about this a little bit. But we also asked for their advice on this. So if there's anything that you see in our resolution here, please let us know what we need to correct, because we do want to make sure that we do this right. We want to make sure that we get input from you all and the support that we need to get this passed. And like you all said, this isn't going to be in concrete. It can develop to include other things. It can develop to make sure that it's a ban, even though it says indefinitely, we could make that into a ban. So again, ladies, thank you for coming. Any suggestions, revisions you offer, greatly appreciate it. As you all know, we are very passionate about working for our people and protecting our people and our land and all the resources that we have in this beautiful area that we have been here forever. So that is just one thing. I thought about the ban. You're talking about that within the school system and our language. We need to talk about that more. That wasn't lost in the conversation. So my concern is also our language. We're keeping our language pure and alive, and we'll have that conversation, because I think that's going to come up next, to make sure that we, like other tribal nations, are not letting ChatGPT take over our language and pollute it and basically brain kill it. So that's what when you said that, I said, okay, that's what we're going to go for next. And so we'll need your help on that and our other language learners on that. And but I want to thank you all for coming here. I was a little late, of course, I was late. But come in on Thursday, the 7th. Come support this. We want our people to be involved in everything that we're doing in that council chamber. This is for you all. It's for all of us. And so we were given the great opportunity to represent our communities and our people. And we want you all to participate in that also. So, yes.
I was thinking one of the subsections that's in the red highlights, there's an open legal loophole where something could become a tribal business and then it would open the pathway to having a decentralized data center. If you inserted a clause that constituted total energy use or total data output, such as like measuring it in data flops or something like that, then you could have specifics on you can't build any data operations larger than this capacity. You could base it off of environmental surveying and then put that through natural resources, and that would give our natural resources department the legal capacity to enforce with hard numbers and data, but then they would have to present to us.
Thank you. I'm going to give you my card, because you said that very, your intelligence in this. That's what we need. That's what we're asking for. This is, read these. Don't just glance over them, read them. Look at the wording, because each word can be manipulated to allow other things to happen. So I'm going to give you my card. You need to meet with us to revise it. Luckily, it hasn't been read into record yet. We could probably do a revision and take it in the day of council. So meet with me and the ladies, because this is their brainchild also. And, we got to work together, but thank you. Yes.
That's one concern, that we're not gonna legal up enough and have all these words and these loopholes covered. I want it covered.
Yes.
I want it banned. We don't ever need it. This is not our property. This is not our land. It belongs to the future generations.
I agree.
And we need to pass it on. And another thing that wasn't mentioned was the impact on the animals. Do y'all forget we eat meat? We might go to the grocery store now, but when I was growing up, we didn't. We got flour and onions and lard, and the rest we hunted and trapped. So we may have to go back to that. So these animals and stuff are very important to our existence. And nothing was mentioned about the animals and
Thank you
anybody
for
that.
sharing that. And we'll take that into consideration also. But I also want to let you all know that the other women are on travel, else they would have been here also. So the other, Levita, Chanel, are heading to a financial conference to protect our finances. But also, Shannon is on personal leave. So that's why they're not here. Else they would be right next to me, ready to speak next. Any other questions? All right. Thank you. I have my card if you guys want it. Thank you.
All right, I think that concludes our gathering for the